Welcome back, Facebook. I'm Jill Malandrino with the Voice of America for NASDAQ's Facebook Live, and we are back again with the Africa Investor Summit, and we have a very special guest with us now, one of the leaders in innovation on the continent, Bob Collymore. He is the CEO of Safaricom, which is the leader of mobile banking in Africa. Thank you for joining us at the NASDAQ. You're also taking on Uber. Mobile banking wasn't enough.
I think a little competition, if you'd forgive the pun, a little competition is always good. Having said that, I'm a big fan of Uber, and here I'm in New York City. Of course, I use Uber extensively, but I think the market is big enough, and we can find some local solutions to some local problems. So if you take the smartphone penetration, for example, it's not that high, and so the solution that we have uses a simple black and white phone, and you can use a taxi hailing service without needing to have a smartphone. So that's what's...
And this is called Little Cabs.
It's called Little Cabs, yes.
Right, and so it works without a smartphone?
You don't need a smartphone. So it uses USSD if you don't have a smartphone. Oh,
really? Okay, so how does that work exactly? Because we all have smartphones here. So the concept outside of Uber is a little bit difficult for a New Yorker to understand. So how does that work exactly?
So it works on a thing which is called USSD, and it's a little bit like sending a text message. So a menu pops down, you dial a short code, a menu pops down, it gives you a number of options, and then you just punch numbers in, option number 1, number 2, and then eventually the guy will call you and say, where are you? Because of course the phone doesn't have GPS. So they'll say, where are you? And you'll say, I'm in Times Square. Obviously not Times Square, but...
Times Square, Kenya.
And then he'll come pick you up.
Right, so let's talk about mobile banking, because you've cornered the market in Kenya. And there is some competition with Visa coming in. It was announced last week. What's next? Because there is definitely growth potential to bring on new customers on the continent, because it seems as if everyone's transitioning over to mobile banking.
I think there's huge potential, and there's huge potential for us to partner with banks. And some of our strongest partnerships are actually with, Kenya Commercial Bank, with the Commercial Bank of Africa, in finding that little niche which is at kind of the bottom end of the market. So micro lending and micro savings in particular, because if you're poor, the challenge is how do you save money? You save it in a mattress or in a tin. And so working with banks, I think, gives us that opportunity. Also, retail payments is I think, a big area of growth for us. It's entirely underexploited in Kenya and across the continent today. More than 90% of the transactions are still cash-based.
Right. So as financial infrastructure improves for the overall outlook in Africa, that could be good as intercontinental trade increases with this infrastructure being developed.
Absolutely. I think the words that we tend to use is, strange enough, the Uberization of these services. I think that, or what a colleague of mine called the softwareization, will break down a number of these barriers. But we still do have some issues around regulators, and regulators understanding how to deal with issues of money laundering, financing for terrorism, and things like that. So we all have to work much more closely together to address the challenges.
Right, and then also I think to foreign currency and the amount of different exchange rates and currency that are on the continent. Do you think you would ever get to one currency for the continent to facilitate trade?
I think if you look at the European experience, it's not necessarily a good example. So there's a lot of talk about it, but I'm not convinced.
Right. I think
I might be proven wrong, of course.
Well, you never know. 40, 50 years down the line.
Well, interestingly, 40, 50 years down the line, I don't think it's going to be having a single currency. I think blockchain is going to play a much more important role. And then it's not going to be an East African or an African thing. It'll be an international thing. And blockchain absolutely has a future.
Right, and you don't have to worry about improving infrastructure since it's brand new from the ground up, and that is certainly an advantage that you have over the U.S. or Western Europe and parts of Asia as well. In fact, I read some statistics last week. I think 84 million Africans are using mobile payment. The next closest is South Asia at 28 million.
That's right, yes.
And the continent's growing faster than anyone else. The
continent's growing, and something that people forget is that we have more mobile phones on the continent of Africa than you have in the United States. It is the most ubiquitous item you have. So if you look at things like, whatever you pick, if you look at healthcare, we're actually much more ubiquitous. If you look at toilets, there are more mobile phones than there are toilets in Africa. More people have access to a mobile phone and have access to clean water. And so that ubiquity gives us a unique position of changing the narrative in Africa.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us here today.
You're welcome.
For Facebook Live for the NASDAQ and the Voice of America, I'm Jill Malandrino.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.